You know that really undeniable feeling of awe you get when you buy a new flagship smartphone?
Oh, yeah, when you finally slide open that pristine, perfectly engineered white box.
Exactly. Yeah, you hold the device and it just feels clean. Feels like the absolute pinnacle of human intelligence right there in the palm of your hand.
It really does. It's a marvel.
But today, on our deep dive, we are looking at the invisible shadow attached to that shiny device. We're unpacking Steve Zimkowski's 2026 book, Man's Folly, the 10 most devastating creations of modern civilization per AI.
It is a fantastic, if slightly terrifying read.
Right. And for those of you listening who are naturally curious, the ones who want to grasp the big picture of how our world actually operates without drowning in information overload, our mission today is to figure out the ultimate paradox of human progress.
Which is such a massive paradox when you really look at it.
It is. Why is a species smart enough to split the atom and, instantly connect the globe, also so remarkably, almost willfully short-sighted?
Okay, let's unpack this, because I am intensely curious to understand how we keep making the exact same conceptual mistakes over and over again.
Well, to really get to the bottom of that paradox, we have
Yeah.
to start by fundamentally shifting how we view a disaster.
What do you mean by that?
So, when society looks at massive industrial or technological catastrophes, the default reaction is to treat them uh, as accidental mishaps, a glitch in the matrix, a stroke of terribly bad luck.
Right, like an isolated oops moment.
Exactly. But Zimkowski's book makes it clear that these follies are not accidents at all. They are predictable, systemic flaws.
So they're built into the system itself.
Yeah, they are the inevitable results of systems where profit, speed, or power are intentionally prioritized over human and environmental health.
Wow. Let's look at the physical world first then, the catastrophic price of industrial progress. Because there are massive historical examples that illustrate the systemic flaw perfectly, right? Absolutely. The book highlights what it calls the big three environmental disasters.
Right, starting with the 1984 Bhopal gas tragedy in India. Over 3,000 people died within a matter of days. And they didn't just die from a random factory explosion,
No, it was a massive leak of a chemical called methyl isocyanate.
which is just awful stuff.
It is a highly toxic, volatile compound used to manufacture pesticides, and when it reacts with water, it turns into a heavy, lethal gas that literally burns your lungs and blinds you.
That is horrifying. And the really terrifying part is that it wasn't a mystery why it leaked. The safety systems, like the refrigeration units meant to keep the chemical cool and the flare towers designed to burn off escaping gas, they were deliberately turned off or left broken.
Right, just to save the company money. It is a textbook failure of corporate responsibility.
Unbelievable.
And you see the exact same pattern when you look at the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster.
That wasn't just a reactor blowing up due to bad engineering, was it?
No, it was a lethal cocktail of human error operating within a governance system that actively punished anyone who dared to report structural flaws.
It's that systemic priority of power over safety again.
Exactly. Fast forward to the 21st century with the 2010 Deepwater Horizon spill. Nearly 5 million barrels of crude oil devastated marine ecosystems and local economies in the Gulf of Mexico.
And again, critical safety mechanisms like the blowout preventer were compromised, right? Because shutting down the rig to properly fix them would have delayed oil extraction.
Yes, speed and profit over safety. It's a repeating loop.
It is really tempting to look at those massive headline-grabbing disasters and think of them as isolated history.
Yeah.
But that exact same negligence fuels our daily reality right now, especially with how we handle hazardous waste.
Oh, absolutely. The polluting industries are still operating the same way.
Think about the local landfills. They aren't just inert piles of trash. They're active chemical reactors. They leach heavy metals right into the groundwater.
And they release massive amounts of methane into the atmosphere.
Right, and methane traps, about 80 times more heat than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period?
Yeah, it's incredibly potent, and these toxic sites are not placed randomly on a map.
No, they are overwhelmingly situated near marginalized low-income communities.
Which brings us right back to your pristine smartphone box. The staggering global crisis of electronic waste.
E-waste, yeah. We upgrade our devices constantly, right? Generating tens of millions of tons of e-waste every single year.
And we just toss the old ones without a second thought.
It really feels like modern industrial progress operates like a technological credit card. We swipe that card for the immediate amazing benefits of cheap energy and brand new electronics.
But we aren't actually paying the bill.
Exactly. We pass a toxic, compounding debt onto vulnerable communities and future generations who are going to have to deal with the interest.
That's a great way to put it.
And just like compound interest, that environmental debt grows. The methane from those e-waste landfills traps heat, which causes extreme weather, which creates even more infrastructural damage. We are paying heavy interest on that swipe.
Meanwhile, we export our toxic lead, mercury, and cadmium to developing nations to be dismantled by hand in unregulated yards.
And we're permanently losing precious metals like gold and silver in the dirt in the process. It's so wasteful.
What's fascinating here is how that compound interest analogy reveals the core psychological mechanism at play.
How so?
Well, we are able to swipe that technological credit card so freely because the global system is actively designed to hide the true cost of consumption.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. When industrialized nations ship their e-waste overseas, it allows you, the consumer, to evade the reality of your habits. Physical distance creates moral distance.
So you don't see the toxic runoff, so the transaction feels completely clean.
Right. And the same short-term mindset that makes a company dump heavy metals into a local river is exactly what drives how we build our cities and grow our food.
Because heavy industry might be the engine of civilization, but engines need fuel, and the mechanics running them need a place to live.
Yes, and we are scaling our survival tactics in a way that actively breaks the ecosystem. Look at conventional intensive farming.
Right, agriculture.
We rely heavily on monocultures,
Yeah.
Planting vast, endless miles of a single crop like corn or soy year after year.
Which completely strips the soil of its natural nutrients.
Yeah.
And it destroys the Earth's ability to sequester carbon.
It does. And to compensate for that dead soil, we pump the earth full of synthetic chemical fertilizers.
But those chemicals don't just stay neatly in the dirt, do they?
No, not at all. When it rains, the excess nitrogen and phosphorus run off into rivers and eventually hit the oceans.
Causing those massive algae blooms.
Exactly. And those blooms consume all the oxygen in the water, creating toxic dead zones where aquatic life literally suffocates.
It is so bleak. And parallel to how we feed ourselves is how we house ourselves. Urban sprawl.
Yes, as populations explode, cities don't just grow denser. They expand uncontrollably outward in low-density developments.
Which paves over natural habitats and isolates communities from one another.
And it creates a built environment where human beings are heavily, sometimes entirely, reliant on polluting personal vehicles just to buy groceries or participate in society.
Okay, wait a minute. I have to offer some pushback here.
Sure, go ahead.
We have to feed and house billions of people on this planet.
Yeah.
Isn't some level of sprawl and intensive chemically assisted farming just the necessary cost of keeping humanity alive? I mean, without conventional farming, wouldn't we face massive global starvation?
That is the exact defense often used to justify the status quo, but it is not the actual need for food and housing that is the folly.
Okay, then what is it?
It is the brute force method we use to fulfill it. We are using a sledgehammer when we should be using a scalpel. There are incredibly viable, sustainable alternatives operating right now. Take vertical farming. You stack crops in controlled indoor environments within the city itself. You get significantly higher yields using a fraction of the land and up to 95% less water.
Wow, 95%.
Yeah, and it's right where the population lives, which cuts out the massive transportation emissions.
Oh, aquaponics is another mind-blowing alternative from the book. It is a closed-loop symbiotic system.
Yes, aquaponics is brilliant.
You raise fish in a tank, and the water, which gets rich in ammonia from the fish waste, is pumped to a hydroponic plant bed. Bacteria convert that ammonia into nitrates, which act as an organic fertilizer for the plants.
It's a perfect natural loop.
Right. The plants absorb those nutrients, naturally filtering the water, which then flows back completely clean to the fish. Zero synthetic chemical fertilizers required.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, you also have community-supported agriculture, or CSA.
Oh, right, the farm share boxes.
Exactly. This bypasses the massive, sprawling, carbon-heavy supply chains by connecting consumers directly to local farmers. You pay a subscription, you get seasonal produce.
Fostering local biodiversity and drastically reducing the carbon footprint.
Right. So our current methods aren't an inevitable necessity. They are a choice, prioritizing short-term extraction over long-term equilibrium.
Okay, so we have these physical spaces like sprawling suburbs that isolate us and this massive physical waste. But this short-term extraction mindset also colonizes our psychological spaces, doesn't it?
It really does, because when you are physically isolated in a sprawling suburb, you often try to fill that void with instant gratification.
And the two biggest peddlers of that are social media and fast fashion.
This is where these systemic flaws become deeply intimate. They affect our daily mental state and our identities.
Yeah, social media ostensibly exists to connect us, but the architecture of these platforms actually fosters profound isolation, anxiety, and a relentless culture of comparison.
Because the algorithms aren't actually designed for connection.
No, they are designed for engagement. To keep your eyes on the screen at all costs, they exploit a psychological mechanism called intermittent variable rewards.
Which is the exact same mechanism as a casino slot machine.
Precisely. When you pull down to refresh your feed, you don't know if you're going to get a funny video, a message from a friend, or an outrage-inducing news headline. That constant uncertainty causes your brain to pump dopamine, keeping you addicted to the swipe.
And because outrage and sensationalism drive the highest engagement, the algorithms prioritize them, creating massive echo chambers of misinformation.
Which actively hinders our ability to take collective action on real-world crises like the dead zones or e-waste we just talked about.
Exactly. It also fuels what psychologists call eco-anxiety, which the book talks about.
Eco-anxiety, yeah.
It's a chronic, debilitating fear of environmental doom that is amplified by a constant barrage of negative algorithmic reinforcement.
And that digital culture of instant gratification bleeds directly into our physical consumption. Fast fashion is a perfect example.
Nicole, fast fashion is entirely driven by this.
Influencers on these exact same platforms drive incredibly rapid trend cycles. A style is popular for 2 weeks. You buy a cheap outfit, wear it once for a photo, and throw it away.
And the mechanics of that industry are devastating. To keep prices that low and cycles that fast, brands use synthetic materials like polyester and nylon.
Which are essentially plastics that take centuries to break down.
Right. The textile dyeing processes consume massive amounts of water and dump toxic chemicals right back into local river systems in developing nations.
All while severely exploiting the labor force, sewing the garments just to maintain artificially low prices.
It's incredibly destructive.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If you step back and look at the tragic irony of these two creations side by side.
It's quite a paradox.
Social media was built with the stated goal of connecting us, but it leaves us deeply isolated and anxious. Fast fashion is designed to make us look good and feel confident temporarily, but the process of making it permanently scars the planet and actively exploits the workers.
The underlying mechanism connecting both of these industries is that they thrive by hacking human psychology.
They bypass our rational long-term thinking and target our evolutionary vulnerabilities.
Exactly. They treat both the human mind and the natural world as disposable resources to be mined for immediate quarterly profit.
It's a heavy realization. We are swiping that technological credit card with our daily consumer habits.
Yeah.
But now, we have to look at the absolute apex of this mindset.
The ultimate threats.
Right, the tools we've designed with literal world-ending power, the emerging technologies we are deploying before we fully understand them, and the broken political systems that allow all of this to operate unchecked.
We are moving from insidious daily threats to acute existential ones, starting with weapons of mass destruction.
And this isn't just about the immediate threat of a nuclear exchange, right?
No, it's the fact that the mere testing of these weapons has already poisoned ancestral lands globally. The legacy of it is already here.
Right, and then there are biological agents. These are terrifying because of their mechanism. They're designed to replicate uncontrollably.
That's the scariest part. A chemical weapon like mustard gas or Agent Orange leaves lasting ecological and physical scars, but a bioweapon is a living pathogen.
Once released, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle. It spreads and mutates independently of its creator.
Which transitions perfectly to the modern frontier of existential risk. Artificial intelligence. AI is not just a tool, it is a systemic disruptor acting on a global scale.
Let's break down how that actually plays out according to the book. First, you have massive job displacement.
Right, because when AI automates not just physical labor, but complex cognitive tasks, it threatens to completely hollow out low-skilled and even mid-level jobs.
Vastly widening the economic gap and destabilizing communities.
But even more insidious than that is algorithmic bias.
How does that work?
Well, an AI model is only as good as the data it is trained on. If you train a hiring algorithm or a law enforcement predictive tool on historical data that contains human prejudices,
The algorithm inherits and amplifies those prejudices at lightning speed.
Exactly. And it does it under the guise of being objective math.
Wow. And perhaps the most pressing nightmare in the AI space is the deployment of autonomous military weapons.
Yes, killer robots, essentially.
We are talking about machines programmed to make lethal, life-and-death decisions without a human pulling the trigger. They fundamentally lack a moral circuit breaker.
Because a human soldier has a conscience, a capacity for hesitation, an understanding of context.
Right, whereas an algorithm simply executes a kill chain based on pattern recognition.
It's chilling.
But none of these things, not the deployment of autonomous weapons, not the e-waste landfills, not the dead zones, happen in a vacuum.
No, they're all facilitated by the ultimate enabler, which is corrupt political systems.
And to be clear for you listening, we are looking at this strictly as factual failures of public trust. When governance fails, the protective barriers between these dangerous innovations and the public dissolve.
The mechanism here is often something called regulatory capture.
Regulatory capture.
Yeah. That is when the industries that are supposed to be strictly regulated end up essentially controlling the government agencies tasked with overseeing them.
Oh, like through intense lobbying or the revolving door of employment between corporations and government.
Precisely.
The Flint, Michigan water crisis is a glaring example of this from the book. In 2014, officials switched the city's water supply to the Flint River to save money.
And the river water was highly corrosive.
Right, and they made a deliberate, spreadsheet-driven decision not to add anti-corrosive chemicals, which would have cost around $100 a day.
$100 a day, that's nothing.
Because of that financial calculation, lead leached from aging pipes into the drinking water of an entire city, causing irreversible neurological damage to children. It was financial expediency overriding basic environmental testing.
You see that same prioritizing of profit over protection with the Amazon rainforest fires.
Right, they aren't wild natural occurrences, are they?
No, they are often intentionally set, fueled by illegal logging and corrupt land management policies that turn a blind eye so agricultural expansion can continue uninterrupted.
And it circles right back to Bhopal, where regulatory capture allowed a pesticide plant to operate with broken safety valves in the middle of a densely populated city.
This raises an important question, though. How do we govern something as complex and fast-moving as artificial intelligence, or effectively rein in deeply entrenched polluting industries when the political systems tasked with protecting us are fundamentally compromised?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. And the answer from the source material is that we absolutely cannot wait for these systems to fix themselves.
It requires radical transparency, robust international cooperation.
Otherwise, an AI model or a methane cloud does not care about national borders.
Exactly. And most importantly, active, relentless civic engagement from the public.
We have covered immense ground today, from the toxic physical reality of e-waste and the dead zones of conventional farming, through the psychological dopamine loops of social media and the rapid waste of fast fashion.
All the way up to autonomous weapons and the regulatory capture that enables it all.
So why does this matter to you? Because you are not just a passive observer in all of this. You are the consumer deciding what clothes to buy. You are the voter shaping the political landscape.
You are the user pulling the lever on that algorithmic slot machine every single day.
Right. Recognizing these systemic choices for what they are is the mandatory first step toward demanding a circular economy.
And just to clarify, a circular economy is a complete shift away from the traditional take, make, dispose model.
It's about designing out the waste.
Exactly. It is an economic system designed to eliminate waste entirely. Products are designed from the ground up to be reused, repaired, and recycled back into the system.
Mimicking nature's closed loops, very much like the aquaponics we discussed earlier.
Yes. Acknowledging that our pursuit of progress has been deeply flawed empowers us to change the metrics of what we consider actual success.
So what does this all mean? As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on that builds on everything we've explored today. If humanity's greatest historical follies are merely the unintended, poorly managed byproducts of our most brilliant innovations.
Which we've seen time and time again today.
Exactly. Could the next world-saving technology we are developing right now already contain the seeds of our next devastating failure? What invisible systemic flaw are we eagerly, joyfully adopting today that future generations will look back on with absolute horror? The next time you slide open a pristine, perfectly engineered white beaks and marvel at the shiny new device inside, ask yourself, what exactly is hiding in the shadow?